Hello and welcome to the Hibs Observer Friday briefing with myself, Liam Bryce, joined by Patrick McPartlin as we react to some news out of Easter Road this evening. A bit of a reshuffle at Boardroom level, some changes there being announced by Hibs this evening. So we're just got a wee bit of reaction, analysis, insight into that in the absence of any actual football going on at the moment. But first, as always, before we get started, just a quick word for our sponsor, because the Hibs Observer is brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV today. With thousands of jobs across Edinburgh and the surrounding area, you'll find the one at S1 Jobs. So start your search today. So, Patrick, as I said, changes announced at Easter Road. Or just a quick summary of the top lines, and then I'll pass over to your good self for some reaction to that. Ian Gordon becoming chairman at the club, effective from June the 1st. He will take over from Malcolm McPherson, who's currently the non-executive chairman. Malcolm will stay on as a non-executive director. Colin Gordon, the brother of Ian Gordon, also joining the board as a non-executive director. And in comes Tim Bezbachenko, the Black Knight FC president. He'll take Bill Foley's seat on the board as an executive director. And it's kind of not too surprising that one. Bezbachenko has been quite heavily involved, quite visible at Hibs over the past few months. So yeah, some changes, some reshuffle, people moving here and there, moving parts. So if you could make sense of all of that for us, just what does it all kind of mean? Who are the kind of major players? What's it going to look like going forward?
Yeah, I think starting with Ian Gordon kind of taking on the role as chairman, I think it's unsurprising when you look at how much he's been doing in his role as I think executive director following his father's passing. I think he has been kind of working towards this when you consider how closely he's been working with Tim Bezbachenko, how closely he's been working with Malky Mackay, and also just the fact that he's been more visible, he's been more involved. He did that round of interviews in September. He did the kind of New Year address back in January, and then he was very visible and gave a kind of update of the club's AGM in February as well. So I don't think it's a huge surprise that he's taken on this role, particularly when you think that Malcolm McPherson really seemed to be suggesting that the reason he was brought in to the position that he was fulfilling really seemed to be at the sort of best of the Gordons. Like they'd asked him to come on board as somebody who knew the club, maybe knew the landscape. But I think it makes sense with the involvement that Ian and the Gordon family have to move into that position, particularly given that Ron Gordon was also chairman. I think it was the non-executive chairman when he took over the club. That was his role. So this feels very much like something that's been in the works for a while, and I don't really think too surprising. Keeping McPherson on the board as a non-executive director, I think you've still got his experience. Obviously very very steeped in legal proceedings with his, like he's still a consultant with Adelshaw Goddard. So you've got his knowledge of the club, you've got his knowledge of Edinburgh, and that kind of like the legal aspects, which would be a benefit to the board. Colin Gordon coming on, I think maybe a little bit more surprising, just because he's not been as sort of heavily or as visibly involved with the club as Ian and Kit, particularly since Ron Gordon passed away. He was at the Rangers game at the end of the season there, and as I understand it, him and Ian are kind of the kind of leads on all the Gordon family interests, all their kind of businesses that they kind of look after. So in that sense, it kind of makes sense that he would want to get more involved, and obviously purely speculating, but perhaps he maybe wanted to be more involved previously and wasn't able to, and it sort of feels like the right time. With Kit Gordon taking a step back from the board, that then means that the two brothers can obviously take part in board meetings, that sort of thing. Kit obviously still staying very involved with the community foundation and the women's team, and I don't think it's taking a step back in so much that she won't be involved. I think she will still be very involved. We know what the club means to the Gordon family, and how even though it was kind of Ron's kind of plaything to begin with, I think they've all kind of taken to the club and the city, and they've spoken a lot about continuing his legacy, and I think that's probably I think that probably kind of runs through the family's feelings at the moment. And then Tim Bezbatchenko coming on board, I think is sort of just makes perfect sense. He's UK based. We know how heavily involved he's been in since joining the Black Knight group back in summer of last year. He's been in Edinburgh a lot. He's been at the training centre. He's been at the games. Again, he was somebody else who spoke at the AGM just to kind of outline the connection with the Black Knights. And I think as the sort of relationship strengthens between Hibs and the Black Knights, between Hibs and the other clubs in the network, it's vital to have somebody like him on board, just as a kind of, I don't know what you call it, as a kind of connection to the rest of the group, to the rest of the teams involved. And I don't think it means, I mean, it does maybe look a little bit alarming. You see, Bill Foley kind of stepping off the board, but I think it's more just that, Bezbatchenko's able to focus purely on the football side of things, purely on the Black Knight group, whereas, Foley's got, I mean, there's the wine business, there's the ice hockey team in America, there's so much more going on. So I think this way it just means you've got someone who's more sort of heavily involved on a day-to-day basis, who I think has really, learned how the club operates, has got to know the people involved to a sort of, a healthy degree. And it just sort of feels like a more natural fit. And obviously Brian Caswell from the Black Knights also remaining on the board. So it's, it maybe looks a bit dramatic. It looks, looks like a lot of change at the top, but I think if you sort of look a bit closer, it does all seem to make sense. And I think when you consider where the club's been in recent years, it has been a bit turbulent. There has been sort of comings and goings at board level and things like that. I think what this looks like really is just almost a kind of an attempt to streamline things a little bit, to just kind of nail down I mean, the larger the board, the more difficult it is presumably to come to decisions. So if you've got a smaller board, then presumably that does make things a bit easier. But I think looking at the sort of the major parts of the shake-up all make sense, and I think just unsurprising when you consider that the club is trying to move forward on and off the field, and as the relationship with the Black Knights grows, that's obviously going to mean changes at the top, and that's what we've seen.
Yeah, I think as you were saying there, I don't think it's I think people might look at it and see, as you said, Bill Foley stepping back, is that kind of, is there something going on there? But as you say, Tim Bezbatchenko, we've seen him at Easter Road plenty of times. You talk about him being, kind of around the training grounds, and it's just, I think what Hibs kind of described it as in the press release. Sorry, just to put it on there. Yeah, it was just saying that Ian Gordon and Tim Bezbatchenko will continue to serve as the liaisons for Hibernian FC and Black Knight to sort of further the partnership. So it seems to be a formalisation of that, really, because as you say, Bezbatchenko's been having a more hands-on role over the last few months, and I suppose for Ian Gordon himself, moving into that, the chairman role, the one that was held by his father, Father Ron, before his passing, think he's been sort of working towards being able to step into that role over the past couple of years, Ian, and obviously, it'll be a big, you've got to imagine a big deal for him personally to sort of officially step into the role that was held by his dad.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you consider how much, as I was saying, how much more visible he's been, how much kind of more involved I think he's been. I think there'll be an element of kind of stepping up, in his father's absence. Basically, I think maybe happens quicker than you might have expected. I imagine that this was probably part of a kind of longer term plan that's maybe been brought forward quicker than they would have wanted for obvious reasons. But I think it makes sense, and I think I suppose when you think about the way the club's moving, the way the club's going in terms of the Black Knight involvement, and just having people who are kind of taking the club forward, who are wanting to kind of complete the kind of progress, I suppose, that's already been kind of undertaken on and off the pitch. And when you think what Ian's been talking about in terms of the kind of upgrades at the training centre, what they've done at the stadium, I'm trying to think what else there's been so much. I think it just kind of it feels like again a natural fit. Again, possibly sooner than he might have expected, but I think he has probably been learning a lot from, not just the people at Easter Road in terms of, the likes of Malky and Malcolm McPherson as well, probably, but the Black Knights too, and knowing how they want to operate has probably given him more of an insight into what he'll need to do on that side of things. But from those who are already at Easter Road, then he knows kind of what's expected as somebody who's leading the club. So I think, this is all bearing in mind that they do have a new CEO coming in soon, and who's going to be concerned, I think, almost entirely with the kind of the business side of the club. You've got Malky Mackay as the sporting director running that side of things. So, there's maybe a lot less pressure, if you like, on Ian Gordon to, be sort of spinning so many plates all at once. And I think that, I think we will expect an announcement on the new CEO very soon. And, I can imagine that, the experience that person has combined with the experience that's already there will sort of be, Ian Gordon will be in good company, basically. It will just be a good kind of mix of experience, of roles. And as I was saying earlier, it just kind of streamlines things. And, it's not, in the same way that they were trying to trim down a bloated first team squad, almost trimming down a bloated hierarchy. And I think, that's no bad thing. And I think it's an exciting time for the club. It's an exciting time for, for the fans. And, it just it feels probably like, the right time to do it as well. The club is kind of riding this wave of positivity. There's a lot still going on off the pitch. As I mentioned about, the changes at HTC, and obviously with the women's team and the under 18s, there's a lot going on. And I think, it makes sense to have as many people as possible in sort of key roles who know what it means, who, know how things are run, and, can sort of do a good job of kind of steering the ship.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we'll leave it there for today. Just a quick reaction to the changes at Boardroom. Almost got that wrong there, at Hibs. There's a kind of full story that explains all this on our website, so a full breakdown of who's left roles and who's moved into roles, if you want to check that out on hibsobserver.co.uk. Also today we'll get an exclusive interview on there with Nicky Cadden, talking about his career path from being rejected at Motherwell all the way down to English football, back up here to Easter Road to be reunited with his brother Chris in the first team. Really good insight from Nicky as to a sort of fascinating career path. To be honest, it's taken him all over the UK, and he seems to have found a home here at Hibs. So if you are a subscriber, do consider checking that out. If you're not a subscriber and you want to sign up to get a look at that, it's a £1 for 6 months offer, gets you access to all our content. On top of that, we've got can I explain ahead of, obviously Hibs aren't playing at Hampden tomorrow, but they'll have a very keen eye on the outcome of that game between Celtic and Aberdeen. So just an explainer on there are the permutations as it relates to European football. Obviously, from a Hibs perspective, they will be hoping that it's Celtic who lift the trophy tomorrow, because that gives them the best route into European football next season. So if you're going to be keeping an eye on that tomorrow and you want to know exactly how it could all pan out, do check out that on our website as well. But thanks for joining us today, folks. We'll be back to speak to you next week. We hope you have a lovely weekend, and we'll catch you again very, very soon. Cheers.
Cheers.